What's up YouTube, JP here. Welcome back. Today we are bringing you episode 3 of the 68 Chevelle LS swapped Pro Tour we're doing. We're finishing up for a buddy as mentioned before in the videos. In episode 2 we brought you the rear coilover QA1 suspension install. Today we're bringing you the front suspension install from QA1 with coilovers. So let's go ahead and get this video going. Alright, so the fronts are still laid out from the other day. Upper lower control arms, tubular. We got the coilovers there, coilover bearings. We have the thicker front sway bar with sway bar end links. And yeah, so a lot of this video is going to end up being kind of like the last video. I would say much more of it will be time-lapsed. You know, standard stuff here. Take off your wheels. We're going to end up needing to probably pull, obviously we're going to need to pull the ball joints out of the hub. So, you know, we're going to have to like tie up the brakes, remove this sway bar here. So some of it will be time-lapsed. I'll talk you guys through it. If you can see, here's that. From the last video I was talking about, the alternator is covered in power steering fluid, which is causing an internal short. So I have my alternator wire off right now. Disconnect this, nothing else plugged in. The battery draw goes away. I can hear the alternator sitting there buzzing with everything off. So definitely a bad alternator, and power steering pump for that matter. But let's go ahead and get the suspension started and we'll go from there. Alright, so what I think we're going to start with, just kind of looking at this, I think it's going to be the easiest, is to go ahead and just remove this sway bar, get the end links out of the way from both sides, being that we're going to replace the sway bar anyway, so that'll give us better access to the ball joint bolts. We're going to need to support the lower control arms to release the coil spring tension, so we'll go ahead and get that removed for you guys. Alright, so we're going to definitely have to clean up the threads in this hole here. I don't know if you guys could, the camera will focus, but this is how the bolt looks and came out. So, I mean, rust is obviously eating it all away. So we'll probably have to fix that thread there, possibly go with an oversized bolt if we can't repair it. There's not enough material there, so something that the other installers did. They put all new sway bar bushings, all new end links, but obviously they weren't too concerned about rust, so we'll get that fixed. So next I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the cotter pins. We'll start removing the 3 cotter pins here, 1, 2, 3. We're going to go ahead and pop the tie rod ends off this spindle. So same thing on this side, pretty self-explanatory. Bend them out of the way, pull them out with a pair of, I found that not needle nose but Dykes wire cutters work the best for gripping these things and pulling them out. So let's get those out of the way. So not all vehicles. Obviously, this has been upgraded to a 4-wheel disc system. I believe these are like C10 truck calipers, but I'm going to remove the calipers next, both sides, and then I'm going to remove the shock. So for me, the caliper is just the 2 bolts there. Then I'll hang it up onto the frame, and on the shock, you're going to have 2 bolts here, both sides, and then you're going to have your, see if I can get in there and see it. There you go. You'll have your top shock bolt there. We're going to go ahead and get these shocks out of the way next before we start breaking apart the hub and releasing the tension on the spring here. So again, caliper, if you guys had drums, you might have to take apart the drums, whatever. Or these should be front disc brakes, I believe, on a 68 anyways, but whatever your calipers look like, take those off, and then we'll do the shocks. Okay, shocks are out. See there? Don't forget to get your rubber mount on top. I haven't grabbed mine yet. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and remove our tie rod. We'll get this one popped off, this one popped off, get them separated, and then we'll start working on the actual ball joints. We're going to support with a jack under the spring because that is spring loaded. So before we ever break any of these loose, we want to make sure that there's something supporting this so it doesn't just shoot down. Alright, so sway bar, or sorry, sway bar, tie rods are both off. I have a tie rod tool, makes popping those things super easy. I think this one's a snap-on one, but Harbor Freight actually carries them for dirt cheap now, and they are an amazing tool to have them, because you can also, if you can fit them, you can also use them on the popping the ball joint. So we're gonna go ahead, I got this supported, the weight of the spring is here with the post jack, so we're gonna go ahead and remove the lower control arm bolt at the ball joint here on both sides. And then obviously we're going to do one side at a time because I only have one post jack, so we'll do that side. We'll get it popped loose, we'll lower it down, and we'll be able to get that coil spring out. We'll come over to this side and do the same thing. Okay, so the coil spring has no tension on it. I can move it by hand. Because of this aftermarket brake, I can't let this all the way down. So before going to the other side, what I'm actually going to do is go ahead, now that there's no tension on here, I'm going to go ahead and remove the upper ball joint bolt, and then that'll allow me to take this out, move it forward, and take it off of here. So as you guys can see, springs are out. The control arms are just hanging. Upper control arms can also be moved. So the next step in the process is going to be removing the control arm bolts here and here. You want to, the instructions say you want to make sure you remember which way they're facing. So these ones are going from the inside out on both sides. I believe it's the same thing over here. Yeah, inside out from both sides. And then the front, sorry, the top, I don't know if I can see in here. Oh, here we go. So the top, you're going to have shims. And we won't get to that part quite yet, but it's going to be this real long bolt, this bolt with bushing here. And then you can also have these, which bolt on with shims. I don't know if you guys can see that, but shims right here behind the bolt. So then there'll be one on each side of the upper control arm. So we'll get the bottoms out first, then we'll move to the top, and if I come across anything that needs to be talked about, I'll talk about it. Alright, lower control arms are out. Both sides. There you go. There they are there. So next we're going to remove the upper control arms. Let me turn on the light for you. There you go. So these studs are going to remain in here. You're going to reuse them unless they're damaged. If they're damaged, you need to replace them. According to the instructions, there's 2 studs. It does say to retain the same exact amount of shims. So when we get those loose, we'll count the shims and we'll make sure we put that same amount of shims back in. And then we'll have one bolt on each side. The other bolt, I can't see it, but you get the gist. It's on the opposite side of the control arm there. Alright you guys, there it is. Upper control arms are out. You don't necessarily have to remove the side bolts here, but it does allow this to turn easier to get this up out of the way. Just kind of if you need to move things, I ended up having to do it. No, let's see here. So you're going to have 2 bolts that go through here. These have collars on them, so if those collars are worn out, you're going to need to replace those bolts. My collars are okay, which is crazy to me, but they're okay, so we're going to reuse them. If we notice any play, we'll just swap them out, but they got enough collar to where they stay in there on their own. They don't bite, but they're not there's no looseness, there's no play, and that's really all that collar's for. So, and if you guys get the control arms mixed up at all, you can just match them up. Stock one, this one, they should have the same bends and curves. So, same thing with the lowers. Alright, as you can see, exact amount of spacers are back in. This is tight. The bump stop hits where the old bump stop would have. So the next thing we're going to start working on before we put the lower control arms is assembling the coilovers. Let's see here. So since we are doing the upper and lower control arm set, that means we are not going to use this T-bracket that came already pre-assembled. We are going to press those out, and we are going to install these here that came with the kit. Alright, so what you guys want to do is remove these snap rings. I have the first one off. We're going to remove both of these to get this T-bracket out of the way. Like so. Set those off to the side. So now what I found is a 3/4 deep socket fits perfectly over that there. We're going to use the vise to press this side into the socket. See that there, hopefully. Get you repositioned. All right. There you go, one T-bracket. Okay, so instructions say very carefully to cut this rubber bushing out. one side is cut off, you should be able just to get the other side to walk out, like so. You'll look inside here and you'll see there's actual areas for some snap rings. So basically the new bushing will go right inside like so. And once you get it all the way flush, the two new baby snap rings that came with it will go into that port there. Same 3/4 socket, you can tap it down. Oh, there you go. Switch my snap ring pliers to the pincher type because these snap rings are going on the inside. I have them on the spreading type, so that switches them over. Now when I squeeze, they get closer together. What we're going to do, go and get one of these in. There you go. Flip it around. There you go. And that is what it will look like now. Next, very similar to the rear, we're going to go ahead and assemble the collars. Get your sticker off. Get your anti-seize. Now we just really need it near the bottom. We can add more up higher later if we push the springs up that high. Discard this as we have bearings. Collar goes up towards the top. I like to take them down basically to the bottom. Again, shoulder collar up. So now we'll add a little more anti-seize for the next few threads. There you go. Alright. Next we'll do the bearing. Two washers bearing. We'll go washer, anti-seize on both sides, bearing, anti-seize on one side that touches the bearing. Bearings next. washer bearing. Set this down. And just on the one side here, on this last bearing, or sorry, last washer. Okay, and that anti-seize goes down, keeps that bearing lubricated there. Alright, you guys, so lower control arm, pretty self-explanatory. Comes with new hardware, goes back into its original locations here and here. Again, on mine, the bolts were going through this way, so we're going to articulate the bolts in the same manner they came out. Same thing for both sides. Alright, so it was really difficult getting these in here because they were kind of compressed from being tightened. I ended up using a big giant rubber mallet, so safest way to do it. I did do silicone spray in there, so that helped it guide in. So now, if I can get you facing upwards here, so the spring, it's going to sit on its original perch. A new coilover is going to go down here. So we'll go ahead and start to get that installed, and then we'll hold this up with the post jack. Alright, next you're going to take your your coilover. Your kit would have came with new washer and bushings, so go ahead and get your bottom ones on like that, and then the other rubber and washer and nut go on the top through the factory hole. It's going to be a little difficult for you guys to see all of this, but I'll try to point this up for you while we get this installed. Okay, so basically all I did is, my camera cut out, so all I did was slide the spring onto the coilover and push it all up in there as one, and then lower it down and put my bolt through the bottom here. I'm going to leave it loose. It's not all the way through the hole up top. I don't know if you can even see in there, but you can see it's loose. I'm going to leave it loose so I can get the spindle on between here and here, so it'll be easier without the extra tension. So as you guys can see, the bottom control arm, upper control arm ball joints both have their nuts on them. They're not tight yet. The coil spring is in its perch. The shock is all the way through. Let's see if we can see the top of it there for you, right there. So you'll put your rubber grommet, washer, and then the nut on top of that and tighten that down. That's what I would tighten down first before relieving the pressure. Go ahead and get that set up, and then you can relieve the pressure and then tighten up your ball joints and your bottom part of the shock. There you guys go. Cotter pins are in. I did use the washer that came with these castle nuts. So, yeah. The only other thing I would say, I tighten this. You don't want to over tighten these, so I tighten it till it got an even squish all the way around on the rubber, and then you have a secondary locking nut to lock the top nut down. So last thing on this side is to tighten the lower control arm bolts, and then get our tie rods back in and our brakes back on. This side's done, and we'll just finish the passenger side up. Alright, so everything's tightened down, brakes are back on, tie rod's back in, new cotter pin, everything's here. You can see up there, it's all tight, double locked. Same thing here, I went ahead and just threw this side together. Figured you guys didn't need to see it on camera. It's the exact same as the driver's side, or sorry, passenger side. So don't forget to, if I didn't mention it already, I would bring your coils up to probably a quarter way up, and then it's easier to lower it from there. That way it's not too low. We're going to go ahead and get the sway bar on, and that's our last piece to this Pro Tour kit. Alright, I went ahead and raised mine up a bit. I can see about 5 threads on both sides. It's a good way to start. You're going to measure from here with the wheel on. When you set the car down, you're going to measure from your center hub to your fender liner, if I haven't mentioned that already. You never want to measure from the ground up, because obviously the ground can be uneven. This will give you a true height from the vehicle, so that way your front end looks even when it's on the ground, on the pavement, on a straight road. So we're going to get this sway bar in now. Sway bar is in. It goes in just like the factory one that you took out. You get all new end links. Make sure you have a good even squish in the rubber all the way around. Don't want to over squish it, but you want to make sure you got a good clamp. This one does require spacers. There's spacers coming in the kits with extra long bolts. My thread ended up being okay here, which is good. And that's it. That is the end of putting the suspension in. Well, there you guys go. That was episode 3 of the 68 Chevelle LS Swap Pro Tour build that we're finishing up for my buddy. Stay tuned. We'll hopefully get some more videos going for you guys. Thanks for watching.